If you've ever been to university or on the internet, which presumably you have since you're watching this video, you've heard the argument that racism is privilege plus power, and therefore that black people, minorities, other minorities, and to some might say women, cannot be racist. It is definitionally impossible for any basically non-white male to be a racist. And yeah, that's a perfectly valid argument. If you've ever watched my previous videos, you were probably wondering, what gives, Travis? What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean that's a valid argument? Well, it's not only a valid argument, but a good opportunity to teach something about logic and some logical definitions. So it all has to do with the concept of validity and the concept of soundness. Now, a valid argument is one whose conclusion follows from its premises. That is to say, that a valid argument, if its premises are true, it must be the case that the conclusion is true. However, that says absolutely nothing about the empirical truth of the premises themselves. Now, a valid argument whose premises are also empirically true is a sound argument. That is to say, the premises are true, and therefore it follows from that fact that the conclusion is in fact true. However, there are many arguments which are valid, however not true. So, I'd like to give you an example of a valid argument. So, premise 1. All swans are white. Premise 2. The bird is a swan. Conclusion. The bird is white. Very simple. Simple example, but if it's true, if it is indeed true that all swans are white, and that this particular bird is a swan, then it necessarily follows, it must be the case, that the bird is white. Now, as I said, whether the premises are true has nothing to do with the validity of that argument. That is a valid argument. However, the empirical reality of whether or not all swans are white, or whether this particular bird, in fact, that I'm looking at is a swan, both of those things are totally open to question. In fact, this is a popular disproof of, well, not a disproof, but a popular way of questioning the accuracy of inductive logic, because for a long time people did indeed believe that all swans are white until they were black swans later encountered, I believe, in Australia or something. But the questions around inductive logic are for a different time. We're just talking about pretty simple deductive logic and what follows from that. So let's get back to the original argument. And that is premise 1. A racist person is somebody who has some kind of negative racial animus, and part 2, who has institutional power. All right? Premise 2. People who aren't white don't have that institutional power. Therefore, it is not possible for a minority group, someone who's not white, to be a racist. Now, I did a little back-of-the-envelope logical proof just to show how such a thing might be done, to prove, yes, that is in fact a valid argument, and also to back up the fact that logic isn't just, it sounds kind of reasonable to me, which is, I think, what a lot of people think logic is. It is, in fact, a formal discipline. There's mathematical logic. Math is a part of logic. Anyways, here's it actually took me an embarrassingly long time to do this. This has actually ended up all being kind of garbage because I made it too difficult, but here's the basic argument right here. I don't know if it's focused, but here it is. This is a logical argument. Here, maybe I can you do this? Yeah, so there is a logical proof of this argument, and I'll read it out for you. So here are my terms. First, W is a white male. D is discrimination or discriminatory attitude and power. Or sorry, prejudice. P is power. R is racism. All right, so racism, R, if and only if, D and P. All right, so you're a racist if and only if you have the discriminatory animus plus power. All right. You have power if and only if you are white. All right, so nobody who is not white has the power, and if you are white, you have some kind of institutional privilege or power. All right. Therefore, okay, if you are not white, you don't have the power. Not W, then if not W, then not P. Okay, therefore, if you're not W, then you are not D and P, both, all right, because you don't have the P. All right, therefore, because R is if and only if, you can be racist if and only if you have D and P, and because no non-white person has P, well, the conclusion is if you're not white, you're not a racist. Yay, you have constructed a valid semantical argument. However, it's kind of a dumb argument, and I will tell you exactly why. This argument is kind of dumb because the definition, the R, of racism here, used by the purveyors of heretofore explained argument, is one that only they use, nobody else knows or uses, and therefore, at best, is just technical jargon used by their Marxist social scientist professors to further the exploration and of whatever it is that they're studying. Okay, so the definition used by 90%, 99% of the other people in the world, the commonly accepted definition of the word racism, is the one that you will find the first hit on your internet search, which I will read to you. At least my first result was, racism is discrimination and prejudice towards people based on their race or ethnicity. No power. Nothing about that shit. All right. Or, second result, prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Still no power. Or the third one I got was a little more interesting. The belief that all members of each race possesses characteristics, abilities, or qualities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races, which is obviously false based on 100% of Olympian long-distance marathon winners being Kenyan or the NBA. Anyways, those are the definitions that the vast majority of people use when they use the word racism. Okay? So the point of contention is not, in fact, the validity of the argument really being used by the social justice warriors in this case. Okay? So let me explain. When people using this minorities can't be racist argument say racist, they're just talking about something different than what everybody else is talking about. Okay, and I think that they genuinely believe that they've been taught some kind of like empirically more accurate or true definition of racism. Okay, so they think that they are educating you by telling you about this argument about privilege and power because they have some higher understanding of the concept of racism. Okay, I think that's what they genuinely believe, and that's the source of the snide, pretentious tone that you get a lot from a lot of YouTube videos, or perhaps personally if you have the mendacity or stupidity to argue with SJWs about this in person. They're very snide because they're like, well, duh, like, why don't you know that racism is prejudice plus power? It's, you are just ignorant, and therefore I'm re-educating you about the true nature of racism. Okay, that's what they believe. So, of course, like, they're like, oh, I'm tired of tired of having to explain this and enacting the labor of explaining my, lofty and far more intellectual ideas to all of you plebes who don't understand my esoteric definition of racism, or frankly, whatever other terms that they choose to redefine. Okay? So that's what they're coming from. But what they don't understand is that you can't use technical jargon in conversation with everyday people all the time. All right? So if my friend comes and says, Travis, a crazy guy came and hit me at the bus stop, look at this bruise, I would be like, he says, I got assaulted at the bus stop, Travis, and I wouldn't be like, that's a battery. What the hell are you talking about, you fool? I learned a lot of legal jargon in law school that is just not appropriate to use in everyday conversation, or going back to my experience of philosophy and what we're talking about right now, the word argument has a very different meaning in philosophy than it does colloquially when most people are talking. Okay, so when two people are arguing, like two spouses are emotionally arguing with each other about whatever, that's a very different concept than what I'm talking about right now with respect to arguments and deductive arguments or inductive arguments and logically proving things or whatever. It's a very different concept. So this argument essentially between the SJWs saying you all don't understand what racism is and black people can't be racist and minorities can't be racist and women can't be racist because they don't have power versus everybody else, that argument is essentially like somebody coming to me and saying, look, those spouses are arguing with each other, and me responding, nuh-uh, they don't have any premises and nothing follows from the premises, or, something. It's not a persuasive, logic-based argument. Yeah, they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about, you douche? Shut up. And that's how a lot of people feel when they're talking to SJWs about this kind of stuff. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? I myself, have a very good friend who I was able to have a normal conversation with. This is maybe why I understand this problem, is we were trying to talk about racism, and of course I was just using the everyday colloquial definition, and she was like, oh, well, maybe if you just mean prejudice, but I mean with bias. I was like, well, of course that's what I mean. And so it's like, okay, well, if we just start off with that definition, then, we can talk about it together. It makes sense, okay? So you got to be really careful about definitions when you're talking about any kind of argument that has any logical kind of form. Or really, it's good to talk about definitions anytime you're talking about anything of import, right? So, anyways, if you want to get to the bottom of the black people and minority can't be racist argument, you gotta attack the premises, okay? Whether or not it's the case that minorities and women or whoever have or do not have institutional power, to what extent that power exists, whether, white people universally have that power or not. Those are the kinds of things that, are worth going after, and maybe I'll make a part 2 where I actually attack the substance of the premises rather than just the form, or explaining the form of the argument, right? So, to SJWs, stop being pretentious and trying to use your jargon definition to a bunch of lay people who have no idea what you're talking about, and then pretending that they're stupid because they aren't in the loop of your little cult, okay? People don't care about that shit, except you. And you are only using this definition to justify a double standard based on people's skin color, which is frankly pretty racist. So, Travis Johnson, half man, half philosopher out. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter. Do whatever you like. Have a good day. Peace out.